All right, welcome back. So this is part two of the Grahas now. So in this particular video, we're going to talk about the Guna of each Graha. We're going to talk about the kind of like the direction it looks in. We're going to talk about the direction where it gains strength. And then we're also going to look at the form of each Graha. So again, let's just review this information right here. Let's look at which planets we're talking about here and what they are. So first and foremost, we're talking about the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. This is the natural order of the planets. I always like to review and refresh and keep this in your mind. So this is very important to understand. So we're going to talk about the Sun. And so you'll see up here on all of these examples, I'm not deleting, we're moving. This is what we're talking about here. You're going to see this is what's important. And then this is the things that we talked about in the first video. And I want you to still keep those in mind because we're going to further define those terms by looking at these terms here. So we know the Sun is a cruel planet. He's a masculine planet, and he represents the king because the Sun's very primary. He represents the number one. It's the primary focus of primary energy of really what we are and what we're here to do. And so what we see here is the Guna of the Sun is Sattva. So Sattva is about purity. Sattva is about the motivation behind our action, behind our solar action, being that of what we're trying to do is create a greater balance, greater harmony, to do something better. And that's the idea of the Sun when it's projecting itself outward. It's not just projecting itself outward because it's cruel. It may be cruel in the way that it goes about that, but what it believes that it is doing is for the greater good, to create more harmony. That's a very sattvic nature. It comes from a very pure place of inspiration. And then what we're going to see here also is all three of these looking up, 10th house, which is the highest place in the sky, and the form of a bird. All of these things point to the Sun being the highest, about reaching the height. So if the sun's gaze, basically where it's looking, the direction it's at, it's always looking up because it's looking up at that great sattvic thing that it's trying to achieve. It's trying to become the greatest it possibly can, to be up here in the sky. And when we talk about houses, the 10th house is when you are born. The 10th house is what is the point that is directly above you. And so the Sun's directional strength, where its energy is at its strongest and directing our lives, is when it's in that 10th house, when it is directly overhead. So there's another indication, Sun's looking up. And then we also talked about, when we talked about the king, we talked about it's like the presiding deity. And when I talk about Leo, I talk about it's like as this lion that's looking down over his territory, like it's standing on like on a cliff overlooking the valley that is its domain. Excuse me. And the Sun here with the form of a bird does exactly that. When a bird is flying, it's looking over all of its territory and seeing everything. And even when a bird lands, it's typically in a tree, it's on a telephone wire, it's on a rooftop or something where it can survey and look down and see everything else that's there. So we can see that with the Sun, you can tie this directly into with the nature of the king and of seeing the bigger picture of becoming the greatest thing that we can become, because like Sattva, it's about for the greatest good of all. So now let's move on to the Moon. So we know that the Moon, what we talked about in the first video, is depending on waxing or waning, it's gentle or cruel, it's feminine, and it's the queen. Well, what we know about the Moon too is the Moon is also just like the Sun. The Guna of the Moon is Sattva. It means that the Moon, what its needs are, what it's trying to achieve for itself, the fulfillment, the internal fulfillment that the Moon is looking for, all the needs and the receptivity of the Moon is to create greater balance. It believes that that's the best thing to do for everybody involved, and that's why the Moon is known as mothering. The queen is like the queen mother, right? And so it's sattvic because it's going to be, the queen is wanting to help everybody from a place of creating greater balance and greater good. And then we see that the Moon is in all directions. Well, this means that the queen isn't just looking at, how are these people doing or these people doing, what's up here. The Moon is being receptive to everything that is in its environment, because the moon is all about adapting. And when we talk about adapting, we have the creeping creatures. What are creeping creatures? Creeping creatures are like little bugs and insects and caterpillars and, roaches, the things that survive after, say, nuclear holocaust or after a great natural disaster. The thing that's going to survive are the creeping creatures. And so we see that the moon has this kind of quality, because we always talk about the moon as being adapting, and it's like our conditioned consciousness, our individualized consciousness that is conditioned to the environment that it is around, because it is receptive to it, it forms to it. It's like that creeping creature. It's evolving and it's adapting. And then when we see that the moon is its directional strength, its dig ball of strength, the moon is strongest when it's in the 4th house. Whereas the sun, the 10th house is what's directly above us. The 4th house is opposite that. It's really about the land underneath our feet, but more so, it's about our internal nature. It's about our happiness. It's about contentment. So what that means is the moon's strength of directing our lives is strongest when it's in that particular location of finding greater fulfillment for us, making us happier. That's why it's adapting like a creeping creature. That's why it's looking in all directions, and that's why it's sattvic, that sattvic idea, so that we feel better about it. Now let's move on to Mars. So we know Mars is the general. We know Mars is masculine and cruel. Well, Mars, his guna is tamas. Tamas is the guna of only, so whereas sattva, is purity and creating greater balance. And then we have Rajas, which is about activity. We'll talk about that when we get to Mercury next. And then Tamas is about not doing anything unless you need to. Tamas is the energy of inertia. And so Mars, he's only active. He's only taking action when he needs to. He's not just taking action like willy-nilly, left and right, and he's not taking action to make things necessarily for the greater good. He's taking action because he needs to, because he's the general. He's following his duty. And that's Mars. Mars is also tamasic. We know that Mars goes from point A to point B as fast as he possibly can. And why does Mars do that? Because he's tamasic. He's only going to exert himself, and he's going to exert himself as fast and as efficient, as logical and methodical as he possibly can to get the job done, so he can go back to just relaxing. Now Mars is looking up, because when he's tamasic, so he's only going after that one thing that he sees needs to be done, that one great thing that's up here. Okay, I have to do this, and that's what I'm focused on. And this is giving us another idea of why Mars is cruel. Because planets that are looking up, which are the Mars and the Sun, they're both looking up. What are they doing? Well, they're not paying attention to anybody that's around them. So Mars especially is going to be the planet that's going to step all over people. He's going to get himself all cut and bruised because he's not paying attention to what's right here, what's below his feet. He's focused on the one goal that he needs to do, and then that is that. And then we see that the moon, again, the sun, Mars, just like the sun also, it's in the house of activity. The 10th house is where it gains its most directional strength. Its ability to direct our lives is when it's right overhead, when it's about the actions that we take. And the 10th house is about the obligations and the great obligations that we need to perform in life, the things that we are most responsible for. And because it's how we're viewed, and that's what Mars is all about. Mars is about, I'm going to take activity over those great things that need to be done, over those great responsibilities and stuff that I need. And the reason why when we talk about responsibilities, because we talk about Mars as a quadruped, because quadrupeds are four-legged animals, right? So a quadruped is like a donkey or a mule or an elephant, which is a pack animal, which can take on a lot of things, and it's just about doing its one duty. But when we talk about Mars as a quadruped also, I would actually focus more on like the cheetah. The cheetah, which is going to lays around all day in search of its prey and just laying around, sitting in trees or whatever cheetahs do. And then when it needs to go after its prey, it goes after that gazelle. And it goes after that gazelle as fast as it possibly can to capture that gazelle and kill it. And then it goes back and eats it, and then it goes back to just resting. That's kind of the nature of the quadruped, and that's kind of how we can look at Mars. And we can tie it back into the qualities of the general and everything that we talked about in the first video. Then we come to Mercury. So we see Mercury here. Now we're going to talk about Rajas Guna. So Rajas is the energy of activity. It's the energy of going here and there, but it's all, and it is also, Rajas is related to our identification with self and who we are. So Rajas is like about, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this activity. I'm going to do this over here. I'm going to do this over here because it is related to me. It's my curiosity. It is something that's going to affect me, and it's about how I'm affected by that thing as well. And we know that Mercury, we talked about this in the first video, you know, Mercury, he gets investigated in things because he just wants to see how everything is going. He has no real stake in the game, but he wants to make everything better. And so the only way you can make everything better is if you're going out and you're taking activity. And if you're seeing how, if you know how one thing is and you know how it can be, that's a very Rajasic mentality of how can that thing be better? How can I make myself better? And then Mercury, again, looking sideways, this reinforces that idea of Rajas. This enforces the idea of the prince going about to all the different kingdoms and talking with all the different kings and stuff and making everything better. Because when you're looking sideways, Mercury's view is looking sideways. He's looking at the things, the practical things that are on the earth that he is going to get involved in. That's what you see when you're looking sideways. You're not looking up at the great things you can achieve. You're not looking down at where you are. He's just looking at dealing with what goes here, what's over here. It's what's on the surface of the earth and the things that I'm going to get embroiled with and interact with. And then Mercury, again, I kind of touched on this about how I can make myself better. Well, Mercury is about the first house as far as where he gains his directional strength. And so Mercury directs our lives best when he's in that first house. When he's in, and what is the first house? The first house is that house on the eastern horizon that's rising up into the sky. So Mercury is about creating and manifesting things. Mercury is about making things better in our life. And also Mercury's form is that of the bird. And again, whereas the bird is up in the sky, and it's up in the sky so it can see all the different directions it can go. Because if you're a bird and you're up in the sky and you're flying, you can go left, you can go right, but you can also go up, you can go down, you can see all the different subtleties and variations of all the land, where all the rivers go to, where all the water is, where all the food is, and you can see all the different directions you can head, because Mercury is about exploration. Mercury is about investigating. What better way to investigate than if you're up high and you're able to see everything? So now let's go ahead and talk about Jupiter. So we know Jupiter is the advisor. He's the planet of activity for purpose and meaning, and it's very gentle with what he's trying to create and bring abundance. Well, Jupiter, not only is he gentle, but he's also sattvic. That means that what Jupiter is doing is for the greater good. It's this purpose that is one that's going to bring more equilibrium to the world, that's going to provide greater balance, provide greater harmony with the abundance and the gentle growth that Jupiter provides. And Jupiter, just like the moon, sees in all directions, because Jupiter sees that bigger picture, sees how everything is connected. And Jupiter is the planet of wisdom. So it's like we have that wisdom behind us of bringing everything pure, which is sattvic, and then that's how we take our activity in life. And that's going to color the nature of the activity of Jupiter, and we're seeing why Jupiter is such a great, gentle, benefic planet. Jupiter, just like Mercury, gains its directional strength, its ability to direct our lives when it's in that first house. Again, that first house is the house on the eastern horizon that is rising in the sky. And so Jupiter is always trying to create and grow and bring more and establish a legacy and something that's greater that can last for a very, very long time. And so with Jupiter in the first house, it's also, that's how it's going to direct. And the first house represents us and our personality and our nature. And so it's like its ability to help us along our path, to help us grow, to help us create, to find a more gentle direction, because Jupiter's a masculine planet. And then Jupiter's biped. So this, you can tie this into the Jupiter seeing in all directions, because a biped is something that stands on two legs, that stands up higher off of the ground, depending on, how tall it is. But anyhow, so it's typically standing taller. It sees a broader view of the land. It can turn its head around and about. It can get involved and manipulate things, because Jupiter is this is also related to being an advisor and a minister. An advisor and a minister has to be able to see the territory and understand what's going on by being able to look around, to be seeing all directions, to being a biped, being aware of things and being able to interact and be able to stop and to think. Then that's how we are able to be a minister. And these are kind of how the qualities of Jupiter now tie into all of this. So let's go ahead and look at Venus. So Venus We know that Venus is the gentle, feminine advisor, minister planet as well. And we know that Venus has to deal with things in this world and how we feel about them, because Venus is a feminine planet now, right? How it's about creating desires and wants and finding contentment. And we also see that because Venus's directional strength is in the fourth house, which is our internal environment, our inside, our happiness, our contentment with life. And this is also where Venus does the best, is when Venus is in the fourth house in our birth chart, because Venus will help to give our life direction by making sure that we're comfortable with the things that are on the plane of reality. And why do I say the plane of reality? Because Venus is looking sideways. Venus is seeing what it has to work with, and it's finding contentment with what it has to work with. And in this reality, being like, it doesn't matter. Venus, a lot of people think that Venus just represents like, oh, if you have a good Venus, that means that you have really nice cars. It means you have a nice house. It means you have nice clothes. Well, that can be true, but a good Venus more indicates that you're happy with the lot that you have in life. Now, whether that happens to be nice clothes or not nice clothes, a nice car or no car, or a really messed up car. If you have a decent Venus in your chart, you're going to be happy with whatever it is that's in your environment. You're going to be more content with those material things in the world. And so Venus now is also Raja's planet, because Venus is the planet of evaluating. Venus is the planet of making choices. This is a very Rajasic energy, because it's, how does this work for me? What, from my perspective, what are these things that are in the world? How am I going to continually take more activity in the world? And that's going to be of, that's going to bring me internal fulfillment. But Venus is also, we've said, it's a gentle feminine planet. So it's also looking to make things better for other people as well. It's to make a fair share for everybody. And that's a very Rajasic quality of like, well, let's make sure that I get 4, you get 4. It's looking at everything, dividing it and making it equal, because because Venus is about the scales and about weighing things evenly. And so we can also see that because Venus is a biped planet, just like Jupiter is, because it's able to see the things that are around. It's able to manipulate and talk and discuss and see things, because it's a minister. A minister needs to be a biped, needs to be able to look around and be able to see what it needs to become content in this world. And then we come on to Saturn. We know that Saturn is a cruel planet. We know that Saturn is neuter. He's a servant. He just does what he has to do. And again, that's that tamasic idea. It ties right into the tamas guna, which is that of just, it's like, I'm just going to do what I have to do. I don't want to do anything other than what I have to do. And that is all there is to it. I don't care about what it brings. I don't care about anything else. I just have to do that. And we also can see that Saturn doesn't, when I say that Saturn doesn't care about anything else than what it has to do, because Saturn's looking down. So what does that mean? So whereas the sun is looking at, and Mars are looking at the greatest thing they can do or the activity they need to achieve, Venus and Mercury are looking over here and just seeing, well, what do I have to work with and interacting with other people and stuff. Well, Saturn is like, okay, wow, this is where I am. I'm right here. This is the one thing that I need to do. Saturn is very much focused, very much present, very much persevering. Because Saturn's a quadruped too. Saturn represents that elephant or that mule or that pack animal that's just carrying its load, bearing its burden of what it has to do. And so Saturn, since it's looking down, it's aware of where it is, which if you're aware of where you are, that's a wonderful thing, because what that can indicate is like, oh my goodness, this is where I'm at right now. That can help us to understand that, like, wow, I'm standing in mud. I'm going to need to move in this direction. This is uncomfortable right here. But there's also a negative side of looking down. And like, if you were climbing a mountain, what do they always tell you? Don't look down, because that's the reality of the situation. If you're sitting there looking down, you're looking at the fears of what can go wrong and what can happen. And so that's kind of where we start to see that Saturn has that nature that we all know him for, and this is starting to get into it. And then we know that Saturn gains its directional strength in the 7th house. Well, what does the seventh house have to do with? Yes, it has to do with relationship. But when Saturn's there, what the seventh house is, and why Saturn gains directional strength and is able to direct our lives better when he's in the seventh house, is because the first house is about our path in life. It's about us and where we're going. And the seventh house is where is away from us, those that are around us. The seventh house is the house of the public, of the masses here. It's the house of everybody else in this world that we will be dealing with. And so when Saturn's there, another part of the seventh house is the seventh house is the setting, is that house on the horizon that is leaving, that's becoming invisible, that was in the sky, and it's crossing the horizon, and then it's going beneath the earth. So it's like it's letting go. So there's a certain idea of seventh house ties into, especially if you know this about astrology. In Vedic astrology, we have these houses that kind of represent death, for lack of a better word. So Saturn is about like the death of things. Saturn represents things that are going away from us. So Saturn's in the seventh house. He's able to help us deal with letting go of things better, so that we can better define who we are by letting go of the things that are holding us back. So now that's Saturn and the other 7 planets. Now we're going to get into the nodes. Now the nodes don't have a form. The nodes are both dark. You'll see this with Rahu and Ketu. We know that because they're the eclipse points of the sun, or the eclipse points of the moon. These are, so we know that these are dark planets. So we already talked about cruel Rahu being in foreign territories. Rahu as this feminine nature with these crazy, almost unfulfillable desires are going to take us in all these different directions. But then we also know that Rahu, then we're going to bring that together with Rahu being of Tamas Guna and Rahu looking down. This is like Saturn. With Rahu, it's about like, oh my gosh, where am I at? I don't know where I am, because he's that attacking army in a foreign territory. He's looking down and it's dark. It's a dark planet. There's no light. He doesn't provide light. He represents darkness, of ignorance, of not knowing where to go with things. And he's looking down at his situation because he's trying to gain a footing and trying to find out where to go. But he's also tamasic. So tamas, another quality of tamas is darkness itself. So we can see that there's a certain amount of inertia with Rahu. There's a certain amount of fears. And this is where we can start to see that Rahu is also a planet of illusion in life. And then Rahu is tamasic. So when it takes us somewhere, it's taking us somewhere because it doesn't like. It's looking down. It sees where this isn't working. I've got to go. I don't know where this is, but I just got to go somewhere. It's dark. I don't know which direction I'm heading in, but I have to do something. And then because Rahu's got this crazy desire of where to go. And these nodes of the moon, Rahu and Ketu, are very, very unpredictable wild cards in the chart. They are somewhat predictable, but there are things that will happen. If you are in Rahu Dasha or you are in Ketu Dasha, regardless of how good of an astrologer that you are, there will always be something that will happen in your Dasha during the time periods of Rahu and Ketu. They're transiting your first house, your first lord, whatever, a self factor in the chart. Then possibly they're going to bring about something crazy that you didn't even expect, put you somewhere where you didn't know, or maybe it's a situation that you need to get out of. Then we come to Ketu. And we talked about Ketu being an introverting force. You know, Ketu is all about inhibition. It's that defending army that never leaves the castle. Neuter. Ketu doesn't look this way or that way. And then Ketu has no sight and is in the darkness. This is really where we start talking about that inhibiting, introverting force of Ketu. When there's other planets that are with Ketu, they're going to tend to be something that is a little bit more hidden, a little bit more, see, it says here, no sight. Ketu represents so Ketu and Rahu are one demon. Rahu is the head without a body. Ketu is the body without a head. If you don't have a head, you can't see where you're going. You don't have an ability to. You don't have a capacity to. So Ketu will really be the planet that really hides things. Rahu will cast an illusion over things, making you think that this is a better thing maybe than it really is. Ketu will make you think that this thing is incapable. I don't see how this can ever work out. And it will be a hidden quality. So if you have a planet with Ketu, chances are that's going to be a planet in energy in your life that maybe there's a little bit disappointment with, where you don't feel like that planet's energy can ever bring you really fulfillment. And so that's kind of the nature of how we can start to look at Ketu and look at all these other planets. Again, I knew this was going to be a long video, so I'm trying to keep the pace going, trying to keep it fast. We've got at least one more video, possibly 2 more that I'm going to go into. And thank you for making it all the way through this, and namaste.